The galaxy was calm that day. Ships drifted along normal route, stations sent their signals, and trade moved across the stars as it always had. Nothing seemed strange until a small ripple in deep space was felt by the sensors of a border outpost. At first the watchers thought it was an error, a small blip that would vanish once the system reset, but the blip grew stronger and clearer until it was no longer a ghost but a shape. A ship was coming through an old forgotten corridor of space, one that no one used anymore. The crew of the outpost leaned closer to the screens, their voices dropped to whispers. It was just one vessel, dark, slow and silent. At first glance it looked ancient, but there was something wrong with it. Every sensor tried to lock onto its design, yet none of them could. No record matched it, no signature made sense, and yet it was clearly real. The commander of the outpost called for the fleet. He ordered every available patrol nearby to form a net around the stranger. No one feared a single vessel, but the unease grew like a shadow. Why would any civilization send only one ship alone through enemy space unless it carried something they did not want to reveal until the last moment? As the fleets gathered, the ship drifted closer without a word. It moved like a predator through the void. Dark metal gleamed against the stars, but the details seemed to shift the longer anyone looked at it. The size was impossible to measure. One moment it looked no larger than a cruiser, the next it stretched like a massive dreadnought. Shadows bent across its hull as if space itself was uncertain how to describe it. One captain of the fleet laughed loudly, calling it a trick or a relic, someone's old war toy perhaps, but his laughter broke the silence too sharply, and none of the others joined him because in their hearts they felt something else, something heavier than amusement. It was fear. The first attempt at scanning the vessel failed. Systems crashed one by one. Another ship tried a deeper scan, but the moment they aimed their instruments, lights flickered across their own bridge. Controls died for seconds, then returned as if nothing had happened. Only now the logs were filled with static, strange whispers laced through the recordings, whispers no one could understand. The commander of the border fleet grew restless. He ordered a cautious hail, but the vessel gave no answer. Instead, it simply continued its steady approach like it knew exactly where it was going. The silence was worse than threats. It was worse than insults. It was like the ship did not care at all. By the time the alien High Council received word, dozens of fleets had encircled the mysterious craft. Politicians debated furiously. Some said destroy it immediately before it reached any populated world. Others said capture it, study it, learn what secrets it carried, but none dared say what they all secretly thought. What if it was human? The word spread like a virus across the network. Some laughed at the idea, calling it old stories, myths told by ancient explorers long dead, but others fell silent, remembering those stories, remembering the warnings passed down from 1,000 years ago. Humans were said to be brutal, clever, and unstoppable. They fought until the last breath and built machines that broke the laws of physics. They vanished before many of the younger species had even risen to power, and so their name turned to legend. Bedtime fear to keep children obedient. And now here was one ship alone and silent, drifting straight into the heart of the galaxy. The commander of the border fleet finally gave the order to intercept. Dozens of cruisers moved into formation, blocking its path. Weapons warmed, shields rose. The alien crews steadied themselves, preparing for whatever came next, but the lone ship did not slow, nor did it shift course. It simply moved forward with quiet patience. Tension clawed at every throat. Each second stretched longer than the last. Finally, the order was given. Fire! A warning shot. One beam of energy streaked across space, blazing bright. It struck the hull of the ship and vanished like smoke against water. No shield flared, no explosion followed. The beam simply dissolved as if it had never existed. Gasps spread across the command deck. Someone shouted it was impossible. Another demanded they fire again, this time with full strength. The order was given. Entire batteries lit up the void, hammering the lone vessel with enough power to tear moons apart. Yet when the light cleared, the ship remained untouched, drifting calmly forward like a ghost. Nothing in the galaxy should have survived such an attack. Silence fell, then screams as every screen across the fleets turned black. Systems shut down one after another. Communications failed. Lights flickered. Shadows crawled across the decks. Some crews swore they heard a voice in the dark, a whisper that said nothing in words they could understand, and yet every heart froze in terror. When the systems returned, the ship was closer, its hull glowing faintly now with lines of light that seemed carved into the very bones of the vessel. Alien admirals argued furiously, calling for retreat, calling for courage. None agreed, but before they could decide, the ship finally moved. One by one its weapons came alive, no bright beams, no thunderous blasts, instead a single pulse spread like a ripple across space. Fleets scrambled, shields raised, but it was too late. Whole ships blinked out of existence as if erased by invisible hands, thousands gone in an instant, no wreckage, no fire, only silence. The survivors panicked, some fled, some tried to regroup, but none dared approach again. The lone vessel drifted once more, silent and patient, as though nothing had happened. Whispers of fear spread faster than light across the galaxy. Humans had been only a myth, a story to frighten the young, but now every world asked the same question: why did they send only one ship? In the High Council chambers, leaders shouted across tables. Some demanded surrender before a second vessel appeared, others demanded an immediate strike with every fleet in the galaxy. But a quiet thought lingered in the back of every mind: if one ship could do this, what would 1,000 do? What would an empire of humans unleash? The lone ship moved closer and closer, ignoring all warnings, all threats, all pleas. It carried no flag, it sent no signal, it spoke no words, and yet its silence screamed louder than any weapon. Every alien who saw it felt the same chill deep in their bones. This was no myth, this was real, and it had only just begun. The galaxy had not slept since the lone ship arrived. Whole systems stayed awake with fear, waiting for updates, waiting for answers, but none came. Fleets still circled the vessel, afraid to get too close, afraid to attack again. The story of the impossible battle spread across networks faster than light. Entire fleets erased with one pulse, no wreckage, no survivors. The survivors who had run told tales of whispers in the dark, voices they swore were human, though no one could explain how they understood them. The High Council sat in silence across the stars, their great chamber filled with hundreds of leaders, each speaking for their species. But even here, in this place of pride and power, there was unease. Every leader knew what the word human meant. Every culture had heard it whispered in old tales, old warnings about a race that fought wars unlike any others, a race that disappeared before the galaxy could unite. Some believed they had destroyed themselves, others believed they had ascended into something greater, and some feared they had never left at all. The council demanded answers. They summoned commanders from the fleet, scientists from research stations, priests from temples, even historians who specialized in ancient myths. The evidence was undeniable. The ship was not a trick, not a fabrication. Its power was real, its design unknown, its purpose uncertain. One scientist spoke with a trembling voice. The patterns on the hull matched designs recorded in artifacts more than 1,000 years old. These artifacts had been ignored, dismissed as fragments from lost civilizations, but now the truth burned too brightly to deny. The ship was human-built, or at least born from human hands. No other race ever carved lines of light like those. The council roared with debate. Some demanded immediate war, a full strike from every ship and every weapon in the galaxy. Others said that to attack blindly was suicide. If a single vessel could erase fleets, what would happen when more arrived? And the most fearful demanded surrender before the humans revealed their true intentions. Meanwhile, out in the dark, the lone vessel drifted closer and closer. It ignored the fleets, ignored the warnings. It gave no sign of fear, no sign of exhaustion. It simply moved forward through space as though the galaxy itself belonged to it. One alien commander, desperate for answers, gathered a small group and launched a covert mission. They would board the ship and learn the truth. They told no one, not even the council, for fear the plan would be stopped. Their vessel slipped past the circling fleets, cloaked in silence and shadows. As they approached, the human ship sensors screamed with static. The closer they came, the more their systems failed. Screens flickered, lights dimmed, yet they pressed forward, fear digging claws into their hearts, but curiosity dragging them closer. At last their vessel touched the hull and latched on the boarding tunnel, extended into the unknown. Inside was darkness deeper than space. Their lights cut through shadows, but the walls seemed to drink the light instead of reflect it. Corridors stretched long and empty, smooth metal lined with the same glowing lines they had seen from outside, but here they pulsed like veins alive with energy. The crew walked slowly, every step heavier than the last. One whispered they should turn back, another argued they had come too far. Then the whispers began, not from their comms, not from each other, but from the walls itself. Soft voices in a language none knew, yet all understood, words that slipped straight into the mind. "You are not welcome. The crew froze, some dropped their weapons, others raised them in shaking hands. The voice was calm yet heavy, filled with power. It carried no emotion, only warning. One of the crew begged to leave, but the commander pushed forward, desperate for the truth. The corridor led them to a vast chamber. At its center was a single figure, not a machine, not a projection, but a body resting in a chair. The body was human, pale skin, dark uniform, eyes closed, as if asleep. The crew stared in disbelief. The stories had been true. Before they could move, the eyes opened, blue light blazing brighter than stars. The figure rose slowly, not with the stiffness of age, but with the strength of something eternal. His gaze swept across them, and they felt their knees weaken, not from force, not from weaponry, but from presence. One spoke, trembling, asking why had humans returned, why only one ship? The human did not answer. Instead he stepped closer, his voice deep and calm. "This is your only warning, leave or vanish." The crew pleaded for answers, but the human only repeated the words, his gaze sharper than any blade. One of the crew panicked, firing his weapon. The blast struck the human full force and dissolved into light, the energy absorbed without sound or mark. The human raised his hand, and the entire chamber shook. The alien who fired vanished, erased, without pain, without scream, gone in an instant. The others dropped their weapons, fell to their knees, begging for mercy. The human said nothing more. Instead he turned and walked back to the chair, sitting once again as if they no longer existed. The survivors fled, stumbling through the corridors, desperate to escape. The voices followed them, whispering into their minds, "Leave, leave, leave." They returned to their ship and cut loose from the human vessel, racing back to the fleet. When they finally transmitted their report, the galaxy trembled. It was no machine, no empty husk, no artificial intelligence. It was a human, a living human, who commanded the vessel alone. The council broke into chaos. Leaders shouted at each other. Panic spread across systems. Whole colonies refused to fight. Some worlds declared surrender before war even began. If one human could control such a vessel, what would happen if there were more? But some leaders saw opportunity. If humans could build such power, perhaps they could steal it or learn it for themselves. Perhaps this ship could be captured. Perhaps the human inside could be broken. A secret order was given. Fleets began preparing in silence. Hidden armies gathered, weapons that had been locked away for centuries. Ancient doomsday machines unearthed and rearmed. The galaxy was split between terror and ambition. Out in the dark, the lone ship drifted onward, silent and unstoppable, never slowing, never explaining, only existing like a shadow of doom. And everywhere across the stars one question echoed louder than all others: if this was only one ship, how many more were waiting beyond the void? The lone human ship kept drifting forward, cutting through space like a shadow. Fleets followed it from a distance, too afraid to attack, but too afraid to let it go. Entire civilizations waited, holding their breath, every channel filled with the same endless talk. What did the human want? Why did only one come? Why now, after thousands of years of silence? On the border of the galactic core, dozens of fleets gathered, each one armed with the strongest weapons known to their species. Commanders stood tense on their bridges as orders came from the High Council. They were to test the ship, they were to discover its true limits. The galaxy could not live in fear without answers. The plan was simple. Small fleets would attack in waves from all sides, overwhelming its defenses. The Council believed the human ship was strong, but no ship could fight against the combined weight of dozens of species. Their hope was not only to destroy it, but to learn how much it could endure. The first fleet moved in sleek cruisers, darting forward, weapons armed. Energy beams cut across the void, brighter than suns, slamming against the human vessel. Every screen flared as energy levels spiked. The attackers cheered for a heartbeat, but then the light faded, and once again the vessel was untouched, drifting as though nothing had happened. Sensors screamed the beams had not been absorbed nor deflected, they had simply ceased to exist. Data showed no reflection, no heat, no reaction. It was as if the weapons had fired into nothing. One captain grew desperate, shouting for another volley. His fleet fired again, this time with missiles, plasma torpedoes, kinetic shells. The void filled with firestorms bright enough to blind whole systems. When the light faded, the human ship was still untouched, and every missile, every torpedo, every shell was gone. The second fleet attacked from behind, firing weapons designed to tear apart planets. Their beams ripped space itself. Their commanders smiled in triumph until the beams bent mid-flight, curving away from the human ship and folding into themselves, collapsing into bursts of harmless static. The fleets gasped. No system in the galaxy could bend weapons in mid-air. The third fleet attacked with living weapons, bioengineered beasts launched across the void with claws sharp enough to pierce steel. They swarmed the ship, thousands of them, but when they reached the hull they froze. They drifted in silence, their bodies stiff and dead, as though life itself had been pulled from them. Fear spread faster than fire across the combined armada. Still the Council demanded the test continue. Every fleet had its chance, but each one failed. Weapons turned to dust, ships erased without explosion, fleets disabled by pulses of unseen force. Entire battles vanished into silence. Finally, only one fleet remained, the most secretive one, hidden even from the Council. This fleet carried ancient relics, weapons so forbidden they were believed myths. The commanders activated their weapon, a sunbreaker bomb designed to ignite a star in seconds. They hurled it directly into the path of the human ship. The explosion was greater than anything seen in ages. Whole systems felt the shockwave. Stars flared, planets cracked from the heat. Nearby fleets retreated in terror, but when the fire faded there, the human ship was still drifting forward untouched, not a scratch on its hull. But this time it moved. The alien commanders screamed for retreat. Ships turned to flee, but it was already too late. The vessel pulsed once, a ripple of silent light spreading outward. Fleets collapsed, ships blinked from existence, vanishing into the dark. Those who survived screamed that their ships had not been destroyed, but stolen sensors showed hundreds of missing vessels, simply gone, ripped away by some force no one could understand. Panic tore through the survivors. They scattered across the stars, fleeing toward home worlds, begging their leaders for answers. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Some shouted that humanity had declared war, others cried that humanity had not spoken a single word. Yet perhaps this was only a warning, perhaps more ships were already waiting to strike. Meanwhile, strange signals began leaking from the human vessel, faint whispers across the networks, fragments of data no one could trace, voices speaking in an old tongue. Some swore the messages said simple words like return or remember, but no one could agree. Some believed they were warnings, others believed they were invitations, and some believed they were simply ghosts of ancient human code. Civilizations began collapsing under fear. Riots spread, colonies abandoned, trade fell apart, armies mutinied, refusing to fight against the myth brought to life. Every leader knew the same truth: even if every ship in the galaxy united, they could not match the strength of a single human vessel. But there were still those who would not surrender. These were the warlords, the hunters, the ones who saw the ship not as a threat, but as a prize. If one human could command such a vessel, perhaps they could capture it and use it for themselves. One warlord gathered his forces in secret, thousands of mercenaries, fleets stolen from old empires, machines built from forbidden labs. He swore he would be the one to claim the human ship, he would be the one to break its secrets. His plan was not to destroy it, but to capture it whole, to crack it open like a vault and steal whatever lay within. He set his trap in the rings of a dead star, hiding thousands of ships in the shadow of broken worlds. When the human vessel drifted near, his fleets closed the trap, walls of fire surrounding it, weapons locked. He ordered every jammer, every net, every trap to fire at once. The void shook with force as the net closed around the lone ship. For the first time, the vessel stopped. Every mercenary cheered. They believed the trap had worked. Gravity snares locked onto the ship, pulling it tight. Energy webs spun around it. Lights flared as shields pulsed, but then silence again. The human ship turned, its hull glowing brighter, the glowing lines spreading across its body like veins awakening. The alien crews fell silent, fear thick in their throats. The warlord shouted for his men to hold steady. Victory was in reach, but then the ship spoke. It was not a voice across comms, it was a voice in the mind, deep and endless, ancient and human. It said only one word: leave. Half the mercenaries fled at once, abandoning their posts, ships turning and scattering like prey. The warlord screamed curses, calling them cowards, ordering the rest to fire. They obeyed, unleashing every weapon, every bomb, every machine in their arsenal. The void exploded brighter than suns. When the light faded, there was nothing left of the trap. Thousands of ships gone, whole fleets erased. The dead star itself cracked into dust, and in the center of the ruin, the lone human vessel still drifted, calm, silent, patient. The warlord's ship floated alone, engines dead, weapons useless, his crew trembling in terror. The human vessel turned toward him slowly, its gaze heavy across the void. The warlord tried to speak, to beg, to curse, but before words left his throat, his ship vanished without sound, without flame, erased from existence. The lone vessel resumed its path, drifting forward as though none of it had ever happened. Across the galaxy silence spread. Entire civilizations fell to their knees, worshipping the return of humans as gods. Others screamed in rebellion, demanding war, even against the impossible, but all of them feared the same truth: this was not a war, this was not even an invasion, this was only one ship. And if only one could do this, what would happen when more arrived? The human ship drifted onward through the void, a silent shadow against the stars. It had destroyed fleets, erased armies, crushed whole systems, shaken, and yet it spoke only once. A single word whispered into every mind. Leave. That word echoed still across the galaxy, worlds trembling under the weight of it, governments arguing if it was a threat or a warning or something far worse. The High Council met again, vast chambers filled with beings from 100 races, their voices loud and desperate. Some shouted for war, others for surrender, many begged for peace. It was clear no weapon could touch the human vessel, but perhaps words could. Perhaps there was a chance to reason with whatever lived inside. So emissaries were chosen, leaders, generals, and speakers from across the galaxy. They would travel together in one great envoy ship to approach the human vessel, not with guns, but with pleas. Their task was simple: discover what the human wanted, and if possible save the galaxy from destruction. The envoy ship launched, its hull covered in the colors of 100 civilizations. No weapons, no armies, only voices. It traveled across dark space, its crew filled with fear, every corridor thick with silence. As they drew closer to the drifting shadow, they all felt it before they even saw it, a weight pressing against their minds like a storm, far away yet already heavy. At last the human vessel came into view. The envoy ship slowed its engines, dimming lights to show peace. Transmissions were sent, endless messages in countless languages, greetings, offers, questions. The envoy begged for an answer, but the human ship gave none. It only drifted, silent, patient, endless. The leaders debated, some wished to flee, others wanted to press closer. Finally they voted to send a smaller craft, a shuttle with only 3 emissaries to approach directly. Those chosen were a lizard general with scales like steel, a soft-spoken speaker whose voice could calm crowds, and a machine diplomat built from living metal. Together they crossed the void, their shuttle a fragile spark against the endless dark. As the shuttle neared, the hull sensors screamed with energy. The 3 emissaries trembled as light spread across the ship, glowing veins crawling along its body, forming strange symbols no translator could read. The speaker whispered that it looked almost like writing, ancient writing. The general kept his hand near his weapon, though none were allowed to fire. The machine diplomat repeated endless greetings, but no answer came. At last their shuttle touched the hull with a soft thud. The metal felt alive, warm and breathing. The door opened and light swallowed them, drawing them inside. Inside the ship was vast corridors of steel and shadow, glowing veins lighting their path. The air was heavy but breathable. The walls hummed like a heartbeat. The emissaries moved slowly, footsteps echoing though none of them spoke aloud. They all felt it, a voice whispering inside their minds one word again: return. The general snarled, demanding to know what it meant. The speaker begged for peace. The machine repeated its greetings, but the voice did not change: return, again and again like a drumbeat, until the walls themselves seemed to shake. The emissaries pressed onward, deeper into the ship, each step heavier than the last. At last they reached a chamber vast and endless, filled with black glass windows showing stars beyond. At its center stood a single chair, old, simple, human in design, and in that chair sat a figure, a man. His eyes closed, his body still, his hair silver like frozen time. He looked alive, yet not breathing, not moving. The emissaries froze, unsure if he was dead or dreaming. Then his eyes opened. The chamber shook, the general stumbled, the speaker gasped, the machine stiffened. The human looked at them, his gaze sharp enough to cut steel. No words left his lips, yet they all heard his voice deep inside their skulls. Why are you here? The speaker bowed, explaining they were emissaries from the council. They begged for peace, for understanding. They asked what humans wanted, why they had returned, why only one ship had come. The human said nothing for a long time, his gaze piercing through them, until finally he whispered one truth. This is not war, this is warning. The emissaries froze, desperate to understand. The general demanded more. "Who are you? What do you mean?" Warning against what the human only closed his eyes again, whispering the same word: "Return." The light grew stronger. The emissaries felt themselves pulled out, thrown back into their shuttle without knowing how. One moment they were inside the chamber, the next they were drifting away, engines dead, systems failing, but the human ship was still there, drifting silent as if nothing had happened. When they returned to the envoy ship, chaos erupted, their minds broken, their words jumbled. Each one told the same story, though in different voices. The human was real, alive, powerful, but his words simple: not war, not invasion, only warning. The council split. Some believed it meant humanity wished them to leave their old territories, that the galaxy had stolen too much from forgotten human space. Others believed it meant something worse, that humans were not warning the galaxy but warning themselves, that something even greater was coming. Meanwhile, shadows moved across the stars. Not every leader believed in peace. Some saw the envoy mission as weakness. To them, the ship was still a prize, still a weapon to be claimed. Warlords, mercenaries, and desperate empires gathered in secret, building new traps, new weapons, far darker than before. They swore they would capture the lone human ship before it destroyed them all. And in the far reaches of space, small colonies began to vanish, whole systems gone without a trace. Some said it was the human ship moving unseen. Others whispered it was something else, something chasing even the humans. Fear spread faster than fire. No one trusted their neighbors. Trade broke, armies split, the galaxy trembled. The human vessel still drifted onward, silent, waiting, but now more systems swore. They heard the same voice across their dreams, return again and again, like a storm crawling closer. Civilizations crumbled under the weight of that word. Some bent their knees, declaring humans as gods. Others armed themselves for final war. One question burned in every mind: why had only one human ship come? Why was one enough to bring a galaxy to its knees? And in the silence of deep space, the vessel finally turned, changing its path for the first time, heading straight toward the galactic core, the heart of all civilizations, as if daring the galaxy to stop it. The galaxy had reached its breaking point. Every world, every system, every empire spoke of nothing else but the lone human ship that drifted endlessly closer. It had ignored fleets, erased armies, rejected pleas from emissaries, and whispered only a single word into the minds of all who dared to listen: return. The word haunted leaders in their sleep, echoed across temples, was written on walls by the terrified masses. Some took it as mercy, others as threat, but all knew the moment of decision could no longer be delayed. The High Council met in secret, their chamber dark and heavy with fear. No one shouted now, no one dared raise their voice. The weight of the human ship hung over them like a noose. The decision was grim, the galaxy could not wait any longer. One voice broke the silence, an old warlord scarred from battle centuries past. He growled that humanity had always been a curse, their myths were filled with destruction and conquest. He demanded a strike, not with single fleets, not with small weapons, but with everything, every weapon of every world unleashed at once. Some leaders trembled, saying such force would break the galaxy itself, but the warlord argued what use was a galaxy if it fell to a single ship? Slowly, one by one, more voices agreed, until the decision was made. The greatest fleet in history would gather, not to defend, not to speak, but to strike. They would meet the human ship head-on at the core of the galaxy before it could spread further, and they would burn it from existence. For months the stars filled with warships, massive armadas gathering from 100 worlds, dreadnoughts, cruisers, swarms of fighters, weapons older than memory dusted off from vaults, forbidden doomsday machines activated again. The void itself grew crowded with firepower. Every system shivered under the pull of so many engines. One by one the ships aligned, forming a ring, a cage around the path of the human vessel. When the fleets were ready, silence fell across the stars. Billions of eyes from every world watched, waiting. Transmissions carried the moment everywhere. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the human ship appeared, drifting calm and unshaken, glowing veins pulsing faintly against the void. The order was given. The fleets opened fire. It was not a single strike, it was endless firepower, a storm of energy beams, missiles, kinetic warheads, weapons designed to shatter planets, even stars. The void burned brighter than suns. The blast consumed the human vessel completely, so vast it blinded sensors across entire sectors. But when the light cleared, the human ship was still there untouched, not a scar on its hull, not a flicker of weakness. It simply drifted forward as though the attack had been nothing. Panic spread through the fleet's commanders screamed for more fire. The storm grew even greater. Whole dreadnoughts sacrificed their cause to hurl impossible blasts, weapons forbidden for ages unleashed in desperation. Again the void burned, again the storm swallowed the lone ship. Again it endured. Then the ship moved. It was not fast, not sudden, it simply shifted its course forward, but in that moment every system in the fleet's failed, lights died, engines shut down, weapons went silent. The greatest armada in history was left blind and powerless, drifting like corpses in space. The human ship pulsed with light, veins glowing brighter and brighter until the fleet shook under the weight of it. Then a wave spread from the vessel, silent, invisible and final. Ships vanished. Not destroyed, not shattered, but erased, gone from existence, without debris, without flame. One moment they were there, the next they were not. Whole sections of the great armada blinked out of sight. Commanders screamed in terror, begging for retreat, but no retreat came because their ships no longer existed. In less than a minute half the fleet was gone. The survivors broke formation, running in every direction, desperate to escape, but the ship did not chase, it did not fire again, it simply drifted onward, silent, as if nothing had happened. The council watched in horror, their greatest force destroyed by a single motion, entire empires lost in silence. Worlds began to scream, begging for surrender, but how does one surrender to a ship that asks only to return? The survivors of the battle spoke of something worse than weapons. They spoke of voices louder than before, whispers of fear pouring into their minds, visions of dead worlds, burning skies, oceans turned to dust. They swore the human was showing them their futures if they resisted. But some survivors spoke of something different. They swore the voices were not only threats but warnings, visions of something else lurking at the edge of the galaxy, a darkness that even the human ship seemed to fear. This divided the galaxy further. Some leaders now believed the human vessel had not come to conquer but to protect, warning them of the coming doom. Others still believed it was simply a monster destroying all who defied it. The galaxy fell into chaos. Whole empires collapsed under the weight of fear. Worlds refused to fight. Some surrendered to a ship that had not asked for it. Others prepared for total war, building new weapons, darker and more dangerous than before. No one agreed on what humanity wanted. No one knew if more ships would follow. Meanwhile, the lone vessel pressed onward through the wreckage of the armada, its path straight toward the galactic core where every race had gathered their greatest cities, their treasures, their histories. It moved without pause, as though nothing could stand in its way. And in the hearts of all who watched, one question burned louder than all others. If one human ship could erase the greatest fleet in history, what hope was left if more were coming? Darkness spread across the galaxy after the destruction of the Great Armada. The news traveled faster than light. Whole civilizations collapsed into despair, knowing their fleets, their weapons, their pride had been erased by one single human ship. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. Leaders hid in silence, people whispered in fear. Some worshipped the ship as a god, while others cursed it as a demon. Still the vessel moved onward, silent and unstoppable, its path set toward the galactic core. On the ruined command ship of the Council, the few leaders who survived sat in silence. None dared speak for a long time. Then one broke the quiet, a machine envoy, its voice sharp like metal striking stone. It said the words none wanted to hear. What if the humans are not our enemy? What if they are warning us of something worse? The others resisted the thought. A human ship had erased millions in an instant. Worlds burned, entire fleets gone. How could such power be called a warning? But the machine envoy pressed on, repeating what the emissaries had said earlier. The human had whispered only one thing: return. Why would it not simply kill them all? Why send visions of darkness spreading beyond the galaxy? They argued through the night, but slowly the seed of fear turned into a seed of doubt. Maybe the humans were not destroying for conquest, maybe they were trying to hold something back. Far away in the wreckage of the battle, survivors drifted through broken space. A lizard soldier, scarred from the fight, floated in a damaged escape pod, his eyes bloodshot, his body weak, but his mind burned with the visions he had seen just before his fleet vanished. It was not fire from the human ship he had seen, it was something else, shadows rising like endless claws, reaching across the stars, swallowing light. He felt them even now, hunting, pressing closer. He sent transmissions across every channel screaming of the visions, but few believed him. Most thought he had gone mad, but a few listened desperate for any answer. They gathered his words, studied the fragments, and found something terrifying. The shadows he described matched an ancient myth, an old story told before the rise of most empires, a story of a hunger that had once threatened the galaxy long ago, a hunger so vast it could devour stars themselves. The story was called the Silent Swarm. The swarm had no bodies, no faces, no voices. It was a tide of endless shadow that consumed everything it touched. Worlds stripped clean, stars drained until they were cold. It had taken the combined strength of every race long ago to drive the swarm out beyond the edge of the galaxy, but no one knew if it was destroyed or only sleeping now. The visions the survivors described were too close, too perfect to be ignored. The council trembled as the report spread. The human ship was not just drifting to the galactic core, it was heading directly toward the oldest archives hidden in a fortress at the very center of known space, the place where the original war with the Silent Swarm was recorded, a place no ship had approached for thousands of years. Fear grew, but also curiosity. Some begged to destroy the human vessel before it reached the core, but others now argued it should be followed. Maybe humanity still remembered the truth. Maybe they had returned because the swarm was waking again. Maybe their warning was not to flee from humans, but to prepare for something worse. Meanwhile, the human ship glided into empty space, its lights glowing brighter each day, as though it drew power from the stars themselves. No one dared approach closely, but watchers from afar reported strange changes. Entire sectors of dead space, once thought lifeless, began to stir. Strange signals pulsed from the void. Static, unlike any known transmission on the edge of the galaxy. Stars began to dim, their light swallowed as if by invisible jaws. On one frontier world, a colony looked up at their sky to see their sun growing weaker day by day until finally it went dark without warning. The people screamed as shadows crawled across their land, shapes without form moving like smoke with teeth. Within hours the colony was gone, every life consumed, every building erased, only empty silence remained. News spread quickly, the swarm was real, it had returned, and it was already here. Panic overtook the galaxy. Worlds burned themselves rather than let the swarm devour them. Fleets retreated from borders. People begged the council for protection, but the council had nothing left. Their great armada destroyed, their weapons useless against even the human ship. What chance would they have against the swarm? Then a strange event shook them all. In the darkness near the dead colony, the human ship appeared. It did not attack, it did not destroy. Instead it unleashed light so bright it cut the shadows apart. The swarm recoiled, hissing without sound, retreating back into the void. The colony remained lifeless, but the spread of the swarm had been halted for the first time. The galaxy now faced a truth they could no longer deny. The human vessel had power far beyond their own, and it was not aimed at them but at the swarm. It was fighting the shadows even as it destroyed those who stood in its way. Leaders gathered once again, and the machine envoy spoke with finality. Humanity has returned, not as conquerors but as guardians. They fight an enemy we cannot. They are telling us to return, because if we stay scattered, if we fight them instead of standing together, we will all fall. But the galaxy was divided. Some accepted this truth and sent messages of surrender and alliance to the human vessel. Others still feared humanity more than the swarm, believing the humans had brought the swarm back with them as punishment. Whispers spread of old betrayal, stories of how humanity may have once commanded the swarm and lost control. Paranoia spread even faster than fear. The human ship gave no answers. It drifted silently toward the galactic core, as if searching for something, its light growing brighter, its whispers louder. The word return now carried weight in every mind, not just warning but command. Civilizations broke apart under the choice: obey or resist. As the swarm devoured more worlds, the question grew sharper: was humanity the last hope of the galaxy, or its final doom? The answer waited at the core, where the ship was leading them all, and where something even greater was beginning to awaken. The galaxy trembled as the swarm spread faster than anyone could have imagined. Entire systems vanished in silence, suns darkened as if swallowed whole, and the void filled with endless shadows. The archives spoke of legends of such hunger, but no one believed the stories until now. Every race, every empire screamed for survival, but none had the power to resist. Fleets that once shone bright with firepower now drifted powerless as the swarm consumed them piece by piece. In the heart of the galaxy at the ancient core, the last council gathered broken and desperate. They watched their maps flicker red, world after world going dark. The swarm was no longer far at the edge. It was here. It moved toward the core where trillions lived, where the oldest civilizations had built their strongest cities, and at its center lay the fortress of knowledge, the one place the human ship had been traveling toward since it first appeared. And there it was. The human vessel drifted silently before the fortress, its glowing vanes brighter than ever. No attack, no destruction, only stillness. It seemed to wait, but for what none could say. Some whispered it was the only shield left against the swarm. Others claimed it was summoning the swarm to the core to finish everything once and for all. Then the darkness came. From every direction shadows poured into the core system, black clouds that moved like living storms, fleets that remained threw themselves at the tide, firing every weapon they had, but nothing slowed it. The shadows swallowed ships as if they were dust. The screams of whole armies filled the channels before silence fell again. Panic spread on the core world. Cities fell into chaos. People fled to underground vaults, but no safety existed from the swarm. It was not fire or metal. It was hunger, endless and eternal. Nothing could stop it. Only the human ship remained calm. Its lights pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Then it began to move. It rose above the fortress, drifting into the path of the swarm. The entire galaxy watched from every channel, billions of eyes staring as one ship faced the tide alone. The swarm struck first. Shadows crashed against the human vessel like waves against stone, but the ship did not break. Its light flared brighter. The shadows recoiled, hissing without sound. The ship pushed forward, cutting into the swarm like a blade of light, and for the first time the tide faltered. The council gasped. The myths were true. Humanity had fought the swarm before. They had been the shield, the guardians, but why had they vanished? Why had they left the galaxy defenseless? No answer came, only the vision of their lone ship fighting once more. The swarm screamed across every mind, not words but feelings, cold, endless hunger, crushing despair. Many fell to their knees, clutching their heads. The galaxy itself seemed to weep under the weight of the swarm's voice, yet still the human ship stood alone. Then something even more terrible happened. The swarm focused all its power on the human vessel. The shadows collapsed inward, wrapping around it, drowning it in blackness. The light flickered weaker, until it almost went out. Hope trembled. Billions watching knew that if the ship fell, the galaxy would be lost. But the vessel endured within the darkness. Its glow returned stronger than before. Not one light, but many small points of light appeared around it, at first faint, then growing brighter. Dozens, hundreds, then thousands of shapes emerged from the shadows. Ships, more human ships. They had come. The galaxy screamed in shock. Humanity had not sent one ship. They had sent scouts, guardians, to hold the line until the others arrived. The legends had said humanity was gone, but the truth was far greater. They had hidden, waiting until the swarm returned, and now the swarm had awakened. So had they. The fleet of human warships formed ranks around the first vessel, their lights pulsing in unison. Together they unleashed waves of energy unlike anything seen before. Not simple weapons, not beams or missiles, but light itself, pure radiant light that cut through the swarm, burning it back. Whole sections of the darkness dissolved into nothing. The tide shrieked and recoiled, but pressed forward, endless, still hungering. The battle shook the galaxy. The swarm consumed stars. The human fleet cut it back, waves of shadow against waves of light. The core system became a war of gods, while the lesser races watched helpless, unable to aid, unable to resist, only to see their fate decided before their eyes. On the council chamber, voices cried that humanity had returned, not as myth, not as conqueror, but as savior. Others still shouted that this was their final trap, that humans had brought the swarm to the core to prove their dominance, but their words carried no weight anymore. The truth was too bright to ignore. Without humanity, the galaxy was already lost. As the battle raged, visions spread through the minds of all living things, not from the swarm, but from the human fleet. Visions of the first war long ago. They saw the swarm rising, devouring whole galaxies. They saw humanity stand against it, burning themselves to hold the line while the younger races fled. They saw humanity stay behind at the edge of existence to cage the swarm away, sacrificing everything. And now they had returned because the cage was broken. The swarm had escaped. The younger races had forgotten, but humanity had not. The visions ended and silence filled the galaxy for a moment before the swarm roared again, this time greater than before. Shadows deeper than night poured from the void and ocean with no end. The human fleet faltered, their light dimming under the weight of so much darkness. The core trembled as though the galaxy itself would collapse under the swarm's hunger. It was then the first ship, the lone vessel that had arrived months before, broke formation. It drifted forward into the very heart of the swarm. The other humans tried to stop it, but it pushed onward, its light blazing brighter than all others. It entered the storm, swallowed whole, and vanished. For a moment despair consumed the galaxy. Humanity's strongest ship was gone. Then the stars shook, the darkness cracked, light erupted from within the swarm, so bright it split the void apart. The lone human ship had sacrificed itself, unleashing a final burst of power, an ancient weapon hidden within its core. The blast spread like fire across the swarm, burning it, tearing it, scattering it into pieces so small it fled back into the void. The tide was broken. The galaxy screamed in relief, tears and joy, and/or humanity had done what none else could. The swarm was not destroyed, but it was beaten, forced to retreat, buying the galaxy time to breathe once more. But the cost was heavy. The lone ship that had first appeared was gone, sacrificed to save them. The other human ships remained silent, their lights dim, as though mourning their fallen kin. They did not speak, they did not claim victory, they only drifted above the core, watching. The galaxy now faced a choice. Humanity had returned, but not in conquest. They had come as guardians, and they had proven it with blood and light. But the swarm was not gone, only delayed, and humanity alone could not hold it forever. Would the younger races finally unite under the truth, or would they fall again into fear and division while the shadows gathered strength once more? The final answer waited in silence as the human fleet remained above the core, watching, waiting their light, a reminder that the myth was real and that the galaxy's greatest test was still yet to come. The galaxy was quiet after the battle, but the silence was not peace, it was heavy, filled with questions and fear. The swarm had been driven back but not destroyed. The stars still carried the scars of their hunger, and everyone knew they would return. It was only a matter of time. In the ruins of the core world, the council met once more, but this time their voices were not filled with pride or control. They were shaken. They had seen the truth. The humans were not gone, the humans were real. And their power was beyond anything they could imagine. Above them, the human fleet drifted motionless, hundreds of warships, their lights dim but steady, watching like silent guardians. The lone ship that had first appeared was gone. Its sacrifice had saved the galaxy, but it had also left a wound. The younger races did not know if the humans would leave them again, or if they would demand something in return. On every world, people whispered about the humans. Some worshipped them as saviors, others feared them as conquerors. Children spoke of them as the warriors of light, and soldiers wondered if they were now useless before such overwhelming strength. The galaxy that once believed it was united now felt small again, divided between those who wanted to trust the humans and those who wanted to prepare to fight them. But the humans remained silent, no words, no messages, no answers. Then on the 10th day after the battle, the silence broke. A single human ship broke formation and moved slowly toward the Fortress of Knowledge, the ancient station at the center of the core. Its lights glowed brighter than the others, as though it carried something more within it, and as it approached, a voice echoed across every channel, every screen, every mind. The voice was human, deep, calm, and filled with something more than command. It carried weight like stone and fire at once. It said, "We are not your gods, we are not your enemies, we are your warning." The galaxy held its breath. The voice continued, "Long ago we stood against the swarm, while you hid. Long ago we bled, so you could live. We were never myths, we were never gone. We waited and watched, because the swarm never dies, it only sleeps." The council chambers shook as the vision returned to their minds. Humanity's past, the first great war, the sacrifice, the prison that held the swarm sealed at the edge of the galaxy, the truth of why humans vanished, not because they were weak, but because they chose to guard the prison forever. The voice spoke again, "But the prison is broken, and now the swarm is free. You have seen its hunger, you know you cannot fight it alone. Our ships cannot stand forever either. This is not only our fight, it is yours. The swarm will return stronger than before, and next time we may not be able to hold them." The words cut deep into every leader, every soldier, every civilian. The humans had shown their strength, but they were also confessing a weakness. The swarm was endless, and even humanity could not guarantee victory. The galaxy would need to stand together or fall forever. But unity was fragile. Old rivalries ran deep. Some empires had spent centuries at war, others had built walls of distrust and fear, and now they were being asked to stand as one against a darkness they could barely comprehend. The voice paused, then grew sharper. When the swarm comes again, you will not have years or decades, you will have days, you will have hours. Decide now whether you will stand with us or die apart. And then the transmission ended. The human ship drifted back to the fleet, their lights dimmed once more, leaving only silence behind. The council fell into chaos. Some shouted for alliance with humanity, others screamed of danger, of surrendering to overlords. Some said it was a trap, that the humans had awakened the swarm themselves to return in glory. Fear and anger filled the chamber, but outside, across the galaxy, the common people already knew their choice. On Broken World, survivors looked up at the human fleet and saw salvation. They had watched the swarm devour fleets and fall. Only when the humans arrived, they had seen one ship sacrifice itself for strangers without hesitation. They did not see conquerors, they saw protectors. Whispers turned to chants. Humanity had returned, humanity had saved them. And then something unexpected happened. Fleets of the younger races began to move, not toward war, but toward the core. Small ships, first rescue craft carrying supplies to help rebuild worlds, then larger fleets, military vessels, not raising weapons but lowering shields. In a show of trust, one by one they came, until a circle of ships from dozens of empires surrounded the human fleet. For the first time in history, the galaxy was united, not by treaties, not by politics, but by fear and hope. They all looked to the humans, waiting for the next move. The humans remained silent until the same voice spoke again. You have chosen well. And for the first time the lights of the human fleet flared brighter. The ships moved into new formation, not as separate vessels, but as one great wall, a shield that spread across the stars. Behind them the fleets of the younger races formed ranks, shadows of the humans, but standing still, the beginning of something greater. But peace did not last long. On the edge of the void the swarm stirred again. The black clouds that had fled were gathering, returning, stronger, larger, hungrier. The stars trembled as the tide rose once more, and this time the galaxy was ready. The battle began with darkness swallowing whole systems once more, but the swarm met not a single ship, not a lonely fleet, but the united strength of every race in the galaxy. Human and alien side by side, ships that once fired on each other now fired in the same direction. Waves of light and fire tore through the swarm, cutting it back. The humans struck hardest, their ships glowing with energy that bent the very void. But now they were not alone. Alien fleets followed their lead, adapting, learning, fighting with new courage. The swarm screamed in fury, but for the first time it felt resistance, not from one race, not from one ship, but from all life together. The war raged for days. The core shook, stars burned, worlds cracked, but the line held. The humans gave their strength, the younger races gave their numbers, and together they pushed the swarm back inch by inch until the tide began to break. In the final clash, the humans revealed their last secret. The lone ship that had sacrificed itself had not been destroyed, it had become a seed of light, and from that seed a weapon grew, an ancient creation of humanity itself, a star forge hidden deep within the void. Awakened by the ship's sacrifice, its light burst across the battlefield, consuming the swarm in waves of pure energy, scattering them across the stars. The swarm was beaten, not destroyed, never destroyed, but beaten back into the endless dark. The galaxy was saved. When the last shadow faded, the fleets drifted in silence, battered, broken, but alive. Cheers spread across channels, voices of every species crying together victory, not just for humans, not just for one empire, but for all. The human fleet did not speak again, they only drifted above the core, their lights glowing soft and steady. Then slowly, one by one, they turned and began to leave, disappearing into the void. The younger races begged them to stay, but no answer came. The humans had done their part, and now it was up to the galaxy to hold its unity. But before they vanished completely, the voice returned once more. Remember, this unity is your only shield. The swarm will return, and when it does, if you stand together you will endure, if you divide you will fall. And with those last words they were gone, leaving only starlight and silence. The galaxy stood changed. Myths had become truth, fear had become hope. The humans were not gone, they were out there waiting, watching, guarding, and now the younger races knew the truth. They were not children anymore, they were defenders too. And though fear of the swarm still lingered, though shadows still stirred in the void, for the first time in history the galaxy did not tremble alone, it stood united, ready and watching.